We are not in the biblical new earth. We're not. Nothing in the Bible is to us. Whenever Jesus came, he told them, he said, pray in this manner, our Father who art in heaven. He said, thy kingdom come. That is talking about New Jerusalem. And he said, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. That was saying, thy will be done in Jerusalem as it is in heaven. That a heavenly Jerusalem was coming. They were on a physical Jerusalem. They had a physical kingdom, a physical temple. They were born of the earth. As is the earthly, so is the earthly. As is the heavenly, so is the heavenly. As they had borne the earthly, so they would bear the heavenly. Whenever Peter said that the elements would melt with a fervent heat in heaven and that the earth would be burnt up, he was saying that the land of Jerusalem, the land of Israel, would be burnt up. And he said they looked for a new land wherein dwelled righteousness. Like Paul, talking about their bodies and relating to the temple, he said that if their earthly house of this tabernacle was dissolved, that they had a home in heaven, an eternal home, eternal in the heavens, whose builder and maker was God. Which is also why it said that the way into the holiest of all was not manifest while the first tabernacle was still standing. This is also why the dead in Christ were waiting under the altar, because they knew that whenever old Jerusalem was destroyed, that New Jerusalem would come, that their reward would be in heaven, that flesh and blood did not inherit that kingdom, that it was a heavenly city, that you would come unto heavenly Jerusalem, a mount that cannot be touched. That's Hebrews 12. A kingdom that was not going to come with observation. You couldn't say, look, it's here in the sea, or look, it's there on the land. The Christians were praying for that New Jerusalem to come, that heavenly city, where they would go to heaven, not here on earth. His kingdom was not of this world. Flesh and blood did not inherit it. But where Jesus went away, he ascended into heaven to prepare a place for them, that so where he was, they could be there also. He went up to prepare them a city. And that was the new earth. Nowhere in the Bible does it actually talk about today, our world today. This was all about the people that were in the old world. And then the Jews became the people of God. And they had the earthly kingdom. And then Jesus came and told them the kingdom of heaven was at hand. In other words, they would end up in heaven whenever the earthly kingdom on earth was destroyed. Whenever that land was destroyed, they would have a new land wherein dwelled righteousness. And just like the Jews could make Gentiles proselyte, and then the Gentiles would keep the law, and they would have an earthly temple, and they would have an earthly kingdom, and they would become circumcised and earthly Jews. Paul was called to preach the gospel to the Gentiles so that they could be grafted in, just like the proselytizing, so that they could have the laws of God inside of them, so that they could have a home in heaven. This was only important to the people who knew about Israel, who knew about Jerusalem, who knew about the belief of these people that there was one God over all, who knew about Abraham. Jerusalem was in the center of the known world back then. The gospel was only important to be preached to people who knew about Jerusalem, Jerusalem who had the law, who had the promise of the Messiah. It's the only people it was important to. They were grafted in, and the fullness of the Gentiles were grafted in before Israel was saved, before the destruction came on earth. Once destruction happened on the earth, that meant New Jerusalem was there. They had a reward, and they went into New Jerusalem. And Jesus Christ reigns over that city in heaven forever. He has an eternal kingdom. He brought them not from a kingdom like David, but to an eternal kingdom. Because of the Catholics and Protestants, people think today that those things are talking about this planet, this earth down here, after 70 AD. Has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Isaiah 66 says, new heaven and a new earth and new Jerusalem. Revelation chapter 21, new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem. It describes New Jerusalem. They would have no more dying, no more pain, no more tears in New Jerusalem, no more sorrow in New Jerusalem. Those that were called out of this world, New Jerusalem. What we have today is not biblical. It's not in the Bible. We are not in the new covenant. Those that were in the old covenant were part of the new covenant. The new covenant didn't happen until Jerusalem was destroyed and New Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem, came. Once they were in heavenly Jerusalem, then they were in a new covenant. Then God walked in them. Then they did not teach every man their neighbor, saying, know the Lord. Then he would be in them from the least unto the greatest. Then they would be his people, and he would be their God, and there would be no more crying, and there would be no more tears. Nothing in the Bible is to us. It's got nothing to do with us today. That's why Paul said in Hebrews, he said that the old covenant was ready to vanish away back then, and it was waxing old back then. And how he had made the first covenant old, that meant that there was a new covenant, where God would walk in them. After those days, saith the Lord, God would walk in them, they would be his people, he would be their God. They would not teach every man their neighbor, saying, Know the Lord, for he would be in them from the least even to the greatest. That was fulfilled in that new kingdom. You got to understand, Jesus came down from heaven. He said, but if you did all these things, he said, then the kingdom of heaven has come unto you, because Jesus came down from heaven to get them, to take them back to heaven, to take them to heaven, to a new land, a new Eden. Concerning this earth today, nobody is seeking God. The Muslims go back to the law, back to Abraham, back to Moses, back to Jesus. They don't seek God. The Christians, back to Jesus, back to Abraham, back to Moses, back to the apostles. All that stuff is old world. Jesus Christ already returned. Christianity ended. It's all done. Nobody seeks for God today, in this day and age, because they think that something in the Bible is for us, and that to know God, we have to know what this Bible says. But nothing in the Bible is for us, not even the new earth. Nothing, none of it. There's nothing in the Bible to us. If you want to know God today, you can know God. Change your focus out of the old world to God. Seek God, be an honest person, tell the truth. He'll tell you how the world works today. But nobody's doing that. Everybody's rejecting God for what happened in the old world. It doesn't matter what people believe about me or anything else. This message is about salvation, and it's very true. And it's getting people back to God, and it's getting them into heaven, and it is the most important message of this day. Christianity ended. The Bible's not to us. Go to God. Believe God.